Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new week of Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about what stress is and the effect it's having on us, how discovering our core values and living by them can help reduce stress, and how to create safety by nurturing your network and relationships with others. But before we get into it, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
Last week, I had a really big work week. I kicked off a new consulting project that I'm working on. I met with a couple of other partners for another business little startup that I've got brewing.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then I had a few big breakthroughs with some projects that I'm working on that are due kind of like in a couple of weeks. And I also made we made some progress on a couple of projects that are kicking along in Fuel Collective too.
We did make a bit of progress, didn't we?
So last week was a very business career centric week for me.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, it was good. It was probably one of those weeks where it felt both depleting and fueling.
You could see the progress, but it was draining in the same breath. Yeah.
Sometimes when you've got big projects, it feels like you work on them for a long time before you see it become anything.
Yeah, you do.
I feel like I've had a few things in my world that I've been clocking lots of hours and time and energy on, but it doesn't feel like I've been getting anywhere. And then
haven't actually come to fruition yet.
Well, nothing's still at fruition, but at least last week I just felt like I was making progress.
Yep.
And what about you? What fueled you up last week?
So I took some time last weekend to do some of my hobbies, which was really fun. So I've got a few projects. Well, I've got a project bike, which I'm actually building up at the moment, which has been sitting around for I think 2 years now. And I haven't made much progress at all. So it was good to, actually get stuck into a bit of a project and to reconnect with some of the things I love doing. Yeah.
And when you started this hobby of refurbing and flipping bicycles, we had a 1 in, 1 out rule.
We did. We did have a 1 in, 1 out rule.
How long did you abide by that rule?
Well, I've only got one project bike. No, I've probably got 2 at the moment. So not long.
You might have 2 that are like semi-constructed, but how many other parts of bikes do you have?
Plenty. That wasn't part of the rule.
But if you put them together, they would be more than 1.
Yes, that's true.
Yes, there's not a 1 in, 1 out.
No.
For context, we live in a 2-bedroom apartment with not a lot of storage. So bikes, this is a sore point. I'm happy for you to have all the things for a hobby that you're engaging in, but when you're not engaging in it, it does just feel like it's just great stuff.
So it's great that I'm making some progress. That's it. And I had a great time too over the weekend, playing around with the bike and putting a new coat of paint on it, and just doing some things that I really like doing. And I feel like that quite often it is hard to actually prioritize those things that you love with all the day-to-day commitments and stuff that happens throughout our lives. And it's just nice to carve out some time and reconnect with some of the things that I love doing. But on the topic of discovering our core values and doing the things we love, here's this week's guest.
Today we've got Laura Picardi joining us. Laura is a stress management expert, speaker and writer. She is the author of bestselling book Unfaked. Everything Laura does is focused on helping people to change the way they think and behave so that they can live the life they want and achieve what they want, all while having a bloody good time in the process. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Hello, guys. Thank you very much for having me.
Not a problem. It's great to have you on.
Hey, so a stress management expert. Tell us about how on earth you got interested in that.
Oh my God, I'll give you the quick version. So I basically worked my butt off in my job trying to reach all my career goals, and I was burning out, but I didn't have time to figure out what that meant. I just had all these weird health things going on. And then the universe gave me a big kick up the bum and said, hey, Laura, you can't keep only sleeping 4 hours a night and working every hour that God sends while smashing your body physically and mentally. And it actually burnt my whole business to the ground. I owned a gym And I built it from an old video store, if anyone remembers what those things were.
Yeah,
old school baby. And yeah, I'd invested everything, and I literally stood and watched the entire thing burn down to the ground, which was quite stressful, let me tell you. So I had all this stuff happening with my health already, which was then supersized. So just to give you a few insights, because it might resonate with some people out there, things like extreme bloating, hormonal issues, very erratic moods, energy problems, even more digestive issues, couldn't think clearly. All this was going on, and I didn't really know how to fix it. So eventually I learned how to fix it after a lot of time and a lot of money spent. And I learned that it was coming from here. So it was my perfectionism, my need to be the best, my need to be liked by everyone, my constantly setting really high standards that were too high to achieve and then beating myself up for not achieving them. And so I had to get on top of this if I wanted to get my health back and indeed my life back. And so once I then figured all that out, I realized that, you know what? Most people are going through the same thing to some degree, and they just don't realize that it's themselves holding themselves back. I then dedicated my life to helping people ideally not go to that place because it freaking sucks. But if they do, helping them get out of it as quickly and efficiently as possible.
So how did you actually realize that it was stress-induced and not something else that was going on with you?
Good question. So I mean, I explored everything else. You know, I did food allergy tests. I had all different diabetes tests and all these kind of different things. And nothing was working. I changed my diet and my exercise constantly. And it was almost by chance that through all of my reading and research, because I became obsessed with trying to figure out what was going on, I then came across some stuff on stress, and I was like, hello, have they written this book about me or what? And that's then when I sort of changed my strategy and then really focused on understanding stress and then employing everything I needed to overcome that.
So we hear that stress is like incredibly bad for you. I think that I've heard something anecdotally that it's like far worse than drinking or smoking, or it can cause heart problems and all sorts of stuff. Someone will have to fact check that, not a doctor. But I assume stresses can be different for different people, but some of them would be common. So what causes stress?
So stress is essentially our brain trying to keep us safe, right? So our brain doesn't know the difference between real and perceived. So it sets off the fight or flight mode, right? Even when we're just constantly thinking, to our brain, it thinks that danger is present. So it responds in the same way as if a wild animal was charging at us or someone cuts us up in traffic. It's thinking all the time, all these thoughts, worries, who should I be? What should I do? All these expectations, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes, oh my God, this person's in danger. I better set off the fight or flight mode response so that they can fight or run away from this thing. But this thing doesn't actually exist, so therefore it never goes away. So this response is constantly being triggered and is not being utilized. We're not fighting, we're not running away. So we end up with all these physiological processes going on that don't need to be. We end up with excess hormones in our bodies that don't need to be there. And then, of course, all of our systems and our organs don't function properly because they're so overworked trying to fight off this stress that then that's when all of the things start to go wrong, essentially.
So we are responding to that little red dot of notifications and an impending deadline and the fact that our in-laws are coming in the same way that we're being chased by a boar.
Yep. It's that simple, you know. People say we're complex beings, and I'm sure you guys come across that all the time when we're talking about love and relationships. You know, it's so complex. It's not really. When you peel off all the layers, all of this stuff comes from one source, really. And once we can start to understand that about ourselves and about each other, then it's actually pretty easy to sort ourselves out and connect with each other and live the lives that we want.
So where do we start to sort ourselves out, Laura?
Drink
some of
lots
that's
of
resonating.
alcohol. No, I'm joking. Look,
not a doctor.
Yeah. So I like things to be simple. I like the easy life. And I kind of distilled all of this down to one. If we could focus on one thing to really help, what would that be? And this is going to sound kind of large, but it's actually very simple. And it really is to be ourselves 100%. Now, a lot of people out there might be freaking out and going, well, how the hell do I do that? I've got so much to do. I need to be so many things to so many people. And it doesn't mean that you can't be things to a lot of people. It doesn't mean that you can't do lots of things. But when we start to change ourselves, when we start to compare ourselves and second guess ourselves to everyone and everything around us, that's what's driving these thoughts, because we're constantly worried, right? That people are going to reject us, that we're not going to be part of something, that we're not good enough. It's constantly triggering these fundamental fears, which is triggering the fight or flight mode response. However, when we can actually operate as ourselves, be comfortable in that space, then we don't have this need to prove ourselves. So we can actually just focus on the things that are important, focus on the people that are important, and let go of these unnecessary thoughts and worries about who we should be and what we should be doing.
I love that you shared this. This is probably going to be a bit long-winded, but stick with me. So I'm a kid of the 90s, and inherently, therefore, I have a love of the Chicago Bulls. And in turn, Phil Jackson, coach who coached Michael Jordan to, I think, 11 premierships that he won across Knicks or Lakers and Chicago Bulls. But something that Phil Jackson talks about in terms of leadership, and something that made him an incredible leader, was that he did it his way, and he did it authentically as him, and he drew in these parts from his childhood and the religious upbringing that he had, and he just showed up as him and totally embraced who he was, and that's what made him an incredible leader and, brought these incredible athletes to long-term success. So I love that you shared that.
Yeah, honestly, it's the core of everything. Now, I know, let me kind of use that as a segue to bring it around to relationships, because that's kind of, what we're here for. But what I have experienced and what I see every single day when I work with people is that until we can actually know who we are and be comfortable with ourselves, it's very difficult to truly connect with people on a deeper level. Because if we're constantly wrapping ourselves up in a barrier because we're worried about someone seeing who we really are because we think we're not good enough, then how can we truly let someone in? And so by getting comfortable with who we are, by knowing who we are in the first place, it means that we have this kind of groundedness, if that's a word, and this inner confidence. So we can kind of let things sort of ride on by. We kind of ride the waves, if you like, rather than get wiped out by them. So we are able to open ourselves up more, let people in more. And if something goes wrong, if we do get hurt, if someone says something or does something, it doesn't fundamentally affect who we are. Sure, it hurts. Sure, it sucks. But it doesn't mean that we have to go and lose ourselves in the process.
All of that sounds great. How do we figure it out? How do we figure out who we are?
Yeah, good question. So the place I start with everyone, and honestly, I'm always surprised at how much people get out of this, because we're never, ever taught it unless we go and seek it, is to really understand what our core values are. So really, what are we passionate about? What brings us joy? What do we need to have in our life in order to feel good? That's essentially us, right? And it can be the big things. It can be, honesty, integrity, respect, adventure, health, all that kind of stuff. But all the little things as well, right? So watching YouTube videos of puppies, rocking out to 90s music, eating so much that you can't move, all that kind of stuff. That's who we are. And so once we can understand all those little things, we can group it into themes, which is essentially our core values. We can really start to understand what makes us tick and what drives us. And I can tell you, it's usually a lot more simple than we think. It's all these little tiny things that light us up. When we do consistently, it allows us to be who we are. And it also communicates safety to our brain. So it overrides this fight or flight mode and allows us to be calm and allows us to be healthier, more energized.
So once you've kind of discovered those things about yourself, how do you go about actually kind of implementing that day to day? Because it can be still pretty difficult to try and fit some of these things in. Like, even though they are things you love, like quite often it is pretty challenging to kind of fit that in around everything else we're doing.
Well, this is why I make a point of saying it's also the little things, because when we are talking about creating change, or when we're just talking about being ourselves, it's actually the little things done consistently that makes the biggest change. So we can all rock out to a song. at some point during the day while we're getting ready for work, while we're going to work. At lunchtime, you can pop your headphones in. Sounds so simple, but what that does, and I'm sure you can appreciate, you've probably got a song that takes you back to some crazy time, maybe in the 90s or whatever, and you just get happy, right? Because it reminds you of who you are. It centers you, it grounds you, it makes you feel calm. We can all do that. We can all have a quick chat to someone we love. We can all quickly pop outside for 5 minutes. We can all sit and take some deep breaths. So once you can identify what those little things are and do those little things consistently, that goes a really long way to helping you know who you are, be who you are, and get that calm kind of feeling in your body. Of course, you can then add all the bigger things on when you have time, traveling and adventure and hanging out with friends. That has to be in there as well. But we've got to start simple and we've got to be consistent.
So would you, if someone's like, oh, I don't really know what my values are, what would you recommend they do?
So I always get people to just brain dump. So just get yourself a big piece of paper and ask yourself those 3 things. What am I passionate about? What brings me joy? And what do I need to have in my life in order to feel good? Keep asking yourself those questions. Write everything that comes into your brain. Don't worry if it makes sense or not. You can figure that out later. Just allow all the things to flow. As I said, big things, small things, everything in between. Once you've got that, which is like your master list, your personal inventory, if you like, then you can start to have a look at all the stuff and start to group it into themes. So maybe you have eating well, being in nature, meditating, exercising, all that might be themed into health, for example. Or maybe you have hanging out with friends, going to the movies, surfing, all those kind of things. That might be grouped under fun. Or you might have podcasts, reading, going to seminars. That might be growth and development. So once you've got a big old brain dump of those things, then you'll just naturally start to see little groups. And then that starts to form your core values. That's it. It's that simple.
Yeah. One of the best tips that I've heard around this identifying your values things is to walk through your calendar and your apartment and your bank statement. And if you look at where you're spending your time, money, and energy, and not where you want to be, but where you really are, it helps identify, what are the things that you surround yourself with? What are the books that are on your bookcase? What is it that you're spending your time doing? And gather that info together to help identify those values. I know that was really beneficial for me when I started thinking a little bit more critically about this, especially when I was saying that my health was really important to me. Then I thought, well, how much of my time, money, and energy am I truly spending nurturing my health?
And then you can identify, okay, so I'm not nurturing my health. Is that a problem for me? Do I feel out of sorts? Do I feel demotivated or not as energized as I'd like to be? And then it might be, yes, it is a value. I'm just not serving it right now. And another exercise that I do with people to kind of check their values is I get them to draw a line on a piece of paper, and it's essentially a timeline from birth until now. And below the line, I get them to put 3 times in their life that were particularly crap.
Shitty.
So yeah, 3 times that were particularly shit. It could be an event, it could be a period of time in your life. And then on the top of the line, 3 times that were particularly excellent. And then kind of pick it apart and go, what was it about those times that made them so shitty? What was it about those times that made them so good? And then you can start to identify what was present in your life at those times and what was missing, right? So if you had a time where you were a bit isolated from your loved ones, or you were all work and no play, or maybe you'd put on weight and you felt lethargic, maybe that means that connection or relationships, fun and health are your values and you weren't serving them. And then likewise, if you had a time where, you were out all the time and having a really good time with your friends and you were eating really well and maybe you'd done like a triathlon or something, then it helps you to show, yeah, you know what, at those times I felt great and those things were present. Therefore, that must be what's important to me and that must be what I value.
Yeah, I love that. In terms of identifying at some point you've already had a recipe for success, pick it apart and identify what were the ingredients.
Yeah, totally. And actually, I always liken it to key ingredients. That's a good way that you've put that, because I'm married to an Italian. You can probably tell by my surname, given that I'm a massive pom as well. And so food features in our lives massively. And so I always liken our core values to key ingredients. So I always say, in Italian food, what must you have for it to be Italian? You've got to have your garlic, your salt, your pepper, your oregano, your tomatoes, whatever it is, your basil. You can then add other things onto it to have some extra flavors, but you have to have these fundamental things in order for it to be Italian food. And it's the same for us, right? We have to have these key ingredients, our core values, in order to be ourselves. We can add all those other flavors on for different times, different situations, but we have to fundamentally have these key ingredients, these core values, in order to be who we are.
That is such a good analogy because coriander doesn't work for everyone.
Oh my gosh, do not put coriander in Italian food. The whole country will be after you.
So once we've kind of discovered our ingredient set and actually start putting in some of these like micro habits, like how does that affect our performance and what have you seen?
Yeah, so, I was saying before that the stress response comes from all these incessant thoughts and our worries about not being enough or having to prove ourselves. So when we are in touch with who we are and we're consistently doing these little things that allow us to consistently be who we are, then we don't have all these thoughts and worries, or we still have them because, look, we can't make them all go away, but we have the power to choose how we respond to them. So therefore, we're not constantly triggering this fight or flight mode. So we've not got all this stuff going on in our bodies unnecessarily. So our whole bodies are calmer. We can think more clearly. We're more energized. We're more motivated. We're like all those things that we all strive for because we've got to the source of what drives it. And we've taken back control, basically, and we're not being led by it. We're back in the driver's seat.
So that process obviously takes the ability to hold some good boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just it gives you the choice, right? We actually all have the choice of how we respond to everything that comes our way. Nothing physical has the power to make us feel anything. It's always the meanings that we give to it. So when we're in this space, when we've got more confidence, when we're comfortable with who we are, we're actually then able to create helpful meanings to situations so we can then create helpful feelings. So as I said, it gives us back that power, that control. Doesn't mean bad things don't happen to us. It just means that we're able to respond in a helpful and proactive way.
Hey, Laura, I want to go back a little bit. So if we've identified our ingredients, and that's really a practice of dating yourself and really getting to know yourself quite intimately and then understanding what it is that you need and what you don't need, how does that influence our romantic relationships? How many shared ingredients do we need? Like, what's the overlap?
Yeah, so as I'm sure you guys probably know and share with everyone, in order for us to be able to truly connect with people, we have to be vulnerable. We have to be able to let people in and we have to be able to let them see who we really are so that we can relax and we can be in the moment, we can be present, and therefore whatever it is that it needs to be, it can be. So in order for us to be able to be truly vulnerable, we have to be comfortable in who we are. We have to know that if we do open ourselves up, nothing can truly touch us. We need to know that we can deal with whatever comes our way. And so that comes through, as I said, knowing what's important to us, knowing where it is that we're going and having the confidence to stay true to that no matter what. And I've experienced that in my own relationship. I see it all the time in my clients' relationships. As we get more comfortable in who we are, then our relationships start to get more comfortable and they start to get stronger. And likewise, when we have stressful times in life, we do kind of then close up a little bit more because we go into protection mode because the brain is trying to protect us. And so you can bet your bottom dollar our relationships will suffer as a result. Like whenever I'm busy, whenever I'm stressed, it's always my husband's fault. He's always like breathing too loud or eating his dinner too loud or not doing something. And really, that's not a problem. It's just that I'm projecting my stress onto him because I'm trying to protect myself.
And what does that look like in that relationship dynamic where sometimes I imagine that in a partnership or in a team or in a couple that there's going to be times where you're both like stressed out of your eyeballs and that's not a great situation to be in. But when we know that our partner is going through a severe time of stress, what is the best thing we can do to support them?
I think understanding them fundamentally before that happens is really important, because we all have a different blueprint for love, right? I mean, we've heard this in all different situations, love language, we all have a different way of showing love and receiving love. So if we can understand what that is for our partner, then we can easily show them love in a way that's going to get straight to their heart. So I'll use the love language example because probably most people know that. So if their love language is acts of service, just doing little things for them is going to really show them that you love them. And then when we feel loved, when we feel appreciated, we feel safe. And as we know, stress comes when we don't feel safe, when our brain thinks we're in danger. So the more we can wrap them up in a little ball of safety by doing the little things that we know make them feel loved, the more we can help them to calm down this stress response and then deal with the stress in a more proactive way.
Yeah. So when we nurture those relationships around us, whether it's with our romantic partner or our wider friends and family, how do you see that impacting ourselves as well?
So this whole thing of safety, right, is the key to everything. Really, when we can be ourselves and truly stand in that space, that's kind of ultimate safety. And when I say do all these little things that serve your values and make you you, that's constant communication that I'm safe, I'm cool. Because if you're doing things that make you feel good, then your brain's like, okay, well, Laura's chilled right now. She's calm, she's laughing, she's present. So clearly there can't be danger present. Otherwise her heart rate would need to be increasing. She'd be trying to fight or get the hell out of there. This safety is what helps us to have everything that we want that we're talking about. Now, people is a massive part of our safety. We have to have a tribe around us. It goes back to when we were cave people, right? We had to have a tribe around us in order to survive. We couldn't have done it on our own. And so there's still that same fundamental need. And so if we've got a strong network of people around us, doesn't have to be a big network of people, but if we've got some real people around us where we can be ourselves, they can be ourselves, so therefore we can truly connect, that's communicating safety to our brain. So again, we're more calm and we're more able to deal with whatever comes our way because we know we've got this solid foundation of safety around us.
Yeah, I love that. And I think probably on the contrary too, if we don't have that network, we would obviously feel unsafe, and then potentially you would see other people as a conflicting tribe or something against you too. So it's probably not a neutral point. It's probably potentially even gone back to on the negative on the scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if we haven't got that safety net around us, we're going to start to put up walls, start to put up barriers. So you're absolutely right. Things that come along that might try to get through those barriers, we're going to be like, hell no, I need to protect myself. So of course, then you're not going to let anyone in and you're not going to be able to have those connections.
So what else comes with a peak understanding and active living of being authentically you? What else is involved?
Do you mean how do you do it, or what are the benefits?
So if we figured out what our values are and we're living in alignment with them, is that the key to living authentically, or are there other parts?
Yeah, look, that's the foundation of it. I then think it's important to pair it with your goals and understand what is it that you want to achieve. In the long term, we need to know where is it I'm going, at least have a bit of an idea of a direction. And your goals together with your values create what I call your life blueprint. It's your guide for life. So anything you need to do, any decisions you need to make, any paths you need to choose, if you check in with your values and your goals, it's going to show you the way, right? Because if you can do something that allows you to be yourself and something that moves you closer to where you want to be, that's going to be the choice to make, right? Now, I understand we can't always do that. We do have to do some stuff that isn't completely aligned. But because we know what's important to us and who we really are, we can kind of make up for it in other areas, right? We can bring another value in to compensate, if you like, for not being able to serve a value at a certain time. If we're busy in business and we have to really focus our time on business, it might take away some of our fun time, so we can then bring something else in to just balance it out a little bit. So those two together really do help you to know who you are and continue to move forward towards where it is you want to be. And then, of course, look, we all have limiting beliefs. They're the stories that we tell ourselves every single day, that kind of stuck record on repeat. And so we do need to then kind of dig into that a little bit, understand what that is, understand how that's holding us back so that we can remove these restraints, if you like, to then be able to move forward and live by our values and move towards our goals.
What would be an example of a limiting belief?
Honestly, the fundamental one that pretty much everyone has is they're not good enough or they're not worthy. Really, if you peel off all the layers of the onion, we are all trying to prove ourselves in some way for different reasons. But we've just decided as we've grown up that we have to prove ourselves in order to be loved, to be worthy, to be considered good enough. And so once we can kind of unpack that belief, that kind of is the key to unlocking all of the other stuff.
So I guess what is perfectionism then, and how is that hurting us?
Perfectionism is basically fear in disguise, right? It's a strategy that your brain has employed in order to keep you safe. So weirdly enough, everything we think, everything we do is a strategy that our brain has employed to keep us safe. Now, it might seem a bit weird. It's like, okay, why am I eating all of the chocolate or drinking all of the bottle of wine? How's that a strategy to keep me safe? But what it's doing is it's keeping you in your comfort zone, right? Because when you step outside your comfort zone, it's the unknown, it's uncertain. So your brain's like, don't go out there. We can't predict what's going to happen. It might be unsafe. Let's just stay here where we know what's going to happen and where we're
With that bottle of wine.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty nice and comfy here.
Yeah, exactly. And so perfectionism is the same thing. It's a way for your brain to essentially hold you back, right? It's like it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You fear that you're not good enough, and then the perfectionism kind of reinforces that. But essentially, it's just the brain going, don't go out there. Please stay here. I'm going to feed you all of these thoughts so that we can stay comfortable and stay safe and not risk going out there and into the danger.
Hey, so Laura, we're coming to the tail end of this. What I would love to know, is there a number one top tip or suggestion or resource, something people could watch, read, listen, do, implement to improve their relationship with themselves?
I think just what I said about the values, like just get yourself a big old piece of paper and ask yourself, what brings me joy? What am I passionate about? What do I have to have in my life in order to feel good? Fill up that piece of paper, fill up 2 if you can. When you think you've said all of the things there are, say a few more. And then start to identify 5 or 6 themes. And that's going to be your core values. And then start to schedule in these tiny little things consistently into your day that make you feel good. And that's going to then start to build this foundation of calm. And as I said, once we are more comfortable in who we are, once our bodies are more calm and not in fight or flight mode consistently, then we're able to open up more, be more vulnerable, and therefore connect better with people.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. And so do you have one tip as well for romantic relationships? And what would be your top tip for keeping a romantic relationship fueled up?
Don't marry an Italian. No, I'm joking.
You full?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, like I'm sure you hear this all the time, but communication. So I am English, and let me tell you, open communication isn't something that comes naturally to us. And I used to be completely closed off. I wouldn't speak about my emotions, and I'd bottle everything up. Every now and then it would explode. And guess what? It didn't allow me to be vulnerable and get close to people. So I spent a lot of my life not having close relationships, which is actually something that's really important to me. And so what I have learned through being married to an Italian is that communication is okay. If someone's giving you feedback, it's not an attack. It's actually an opportunity to come together even more, to be able to give each other what you need, and therefore live an easier, a happier, a more fulfilled life together, a more fun life together. And so while it's terrifying sometimes to actually say how you feel, if you can just take a deep breath, remember the outcome, that by speaking you're going to allow yourselves to grow more connected and therefore be happier and have a better time together. It allows you to move through that fear and to articulate what it is that you want to say so that you can then come to an outcome that you're both happy with.
Is there a habit or a practice that you've got in your own relationship that helps foster that quality communication?
We just say what we say whenever we want to say it. So again, I used to wait for the ideal time to say something. And guess what? It was never the ideal time. And then it would all bottle up and then I just blurt it out and it would be a real mess. So we do if something has to be said, we say it. That really is for us the healthiest thing to do. Sometimes my husband now says, Laura, do you have to say everything? Can you not just keep some stuff to yourself?
You've gone the other way.
I've completely gone the other way. But I'm like, darling, it's better that I do this. Otherwise, it's going to grow into a big, ugly monster. So please just entertain my sometimes crazy thoughts, but let me just get it out. And then it's gone. It's into the world. I've got perspective and it doesn't need to grow into something that it doesn't need to be.
Love that.
Squish it quick.
Yep.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us. This has been awesome. There were lots of practical tips and exercises and activities that people can go away and do to help fuel up their relationships. But to say thank you for joining us today, we've given 100 days of medication to some nursery school students in Ethiopia. Lots of these kids lack really basic medical care and are really susceptible to diseases and infections. So these contributions help get them sorted really early in their life and allow them to grow up nice and physically and healthily strong and active. So thank you so much for making that possible.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
No worries. So, Laura, if people want to connect with you or learn a little bit more about what you do, how should they do that?
Look, Instagram is always a good one. Who's not always on Instagram? So I'm LA Picardi AU. That's LAPICCARDIAU. If anything is worth knowing about what's happening in my world, it'll be on there. So that's the best part.
I love it. Awesome. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.